With the recent success of Sinners, I think it's safe to say that Michael B. Jordan is a star in today's age of cinema. And I'd attribute a lot of that to his amazing start with shows like The Wire and Friday Night Lights. But the movie that I give credit that shows that he could be a star for the first time is Chronicle. I'm Will, aka Mark, and today we're going to talk just that. So, if you like the video, hit subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment down below what you want to see next on the channel. Chronicle was the baby of new director Josh Trank and screenwriter Max Landis, whose dad is actually filmmaker John Landis. And just to show you a little bit more, Josh Trank's dad is Richard Trank, who is also a film producer, and his stepmom is Judy Toll, who wrote on projects like Boy Meets World and Sex and the City. Not really important, just wanted to show you there's more nepotism in Hollywood than you would think. The idea for Chronicle came out of an idea of viral videos that director Trank wanted to make and post on social media just to go viral for fun, but over time he realized that he actually could make a plot of a movie for this. He wanted it to be more thoughtful and intentional, so he came up with the idea of making it a coming-of-age teenage story. So this idea was beefed up by Trank and writer Jeremy Slater, who ended up moving on to other projects, so they reached out to Max Landis, and he agreed to help co-write the script. So following the writing of this script, it was pushed over to Fox, who then bought the project, but under the condition that Trank could direct it. In the process of casting, Dane DeHaan was actually the first actor brought on board for this project due to his work on In Treatment. They were looking for somebody familiar, raw, and just overall talented, and upon his work, they found that he fit all the criteria. Over 1,000 actors auditioned for the other parts, and it ended up falling on Alex Russell and Michael B. Jordan as the rest that was casted for this. They decided that this film should be a found footage movie so they could stay in line with that viral video idea, but also, make the story a little bit more personal and get the audience involved as well. In interviews, Trank said that his favorite scenes to shoot were the flying scenes because he felt like it was just pure wish fulfillment and it was exactly what people would want to see. So all in all, he wanted to tell a complex story, but also keep it simple enough that people could follow along and easily relate to the struggles of the protagonist in this film. This particularly shows through the dialogue, which is very natural feeling, and I'd attribute a lot of that to Max Landis' screenwriting in here. According to the actors in interviews, about 85 to 90% of the dialogue was actually scripted with a very small amount that was actually improvised. So again, that's a huge credit to Max Landis for making such a natural sounding script, even sound improvisational. This movie made $126 million off of a meager $15 million budget, and honestly, I feel like it deserved more money. And it gained a cult following after the release following the theatrical release because it didn't really get the widest one. I'll let the movie speak for itself. Let's get to the plot. Chronicle starts with us looking through the lens of Andrew Detmer, played by Dane DeHaan. And I mean that literally because Andrew bought a new camera. But that's not because he's trying to be the next YouTube sensation or vlogger or anything like that, but because he's actually a victim of abuse from his father, and his mother's terminally ill, so I'd imagine he's trying to capture a lot of her final moments and, things of that nature. Now, this is the vehicle that a majority of this film is told through. There are others, and we'll get to that later, but majority of it is told from the viewpoint of Andrew and through his camera. Then enter Matt Garrity, played by Alex Russell. We find out that he's the closest thing that Andrew's really got to his friend, and he's also his cousin. But he comes to pick him up from school, and we go from there. One thing I try to focus on when I watch movies is when a character mentions a philosopher or philosophy, I like to kind of look it up because a lot of the time it's told through that person's perspective. Sometimes it's not the exact quotes, or sometimes it's something that can hint towards other stuff that's going on in the movie. I do this essentially because screenwriters don't just write things just to write things. Everything is intentional and it's for a reason. So during this drive, Matt brings up Arthur Schopenhauer. And he says this.
Basically, human beings have to recognize themselves as beings of pure will. All emotional and physical desires can never be fulfilled.
So basically you're telling me that I should give up on life?
Yes.
I took a look at this quote, and the way that I kind of see it is that human beings aren't just will, but the universe in itself is will. A blind, irrational force that drives all reason and all motivations. And this can manifest in things like the human will to live. But Matt's take on this is a lot more pessimistic than I would believe Schopenhauer's actual quote is. Because Matt's take on this is that your needs and wills will never be met throughout all of humanity, throughout all of your existence. But Schopenhauer never really states this inside of his own philosophy. More so, he just states that free will is not real, but everything is driven towards a universal will. The best quote to sum this up is a man can do as he wills, but he cannot will as he wills. That's as far into the philosophy I'm really going to go because I'm not a philosopher by nature. I'm not going to try to get into it too much, but I just thought Matt's take on it was interesting. I'm also tired of saying will. So, we didn't go through a typical day of school for Andrew, which includes class elections, some debatable voyeurism, topped off with some definite bullying. So again, pretty rough stuff here. I'd also like to make it clear, I don't actually think Andrew's a voyeur, but it is kind of creepy that he's sitting here just recording these girls. But I think it's more of just an instance of him being socially awkward and just not understanding what it is that he is doing or how it's perceived. And this gets emphasized by his cousin Matt, who tells Andrew that he should probably leave his camera at home while they're on the way to a barn party that night. It's so funny because nowadays cameras are so like commonplace that nowadays if a kid was doing this at school, it wouldn't really seem all that out of the ordinary. Sure, it's a huge camera he's carrying around, but you know, kids record on their phones and stuff all the time so much that if this movie was made in 2025, I don't think this would be as big of a point of contention, but it makes sense for 2012. Plus, Andrew will kind of literally film anything, like maybe not film the drug dealers doing an obvious drug deal in your neighborhood, because I don't think they're going to be very happy about that, but hey, that's just kind of common sense to me. Oh, remember the abuse that I talked about earlier?
What do you want?
When I say open that door, you open the door. You got it?
The camera didn't slow anything down. Then we get to the rave, and some of you might be wondering, Will, didn't you say that this is told from Andrew's perspective? Why can we see Andrew with his camera? Well, this film is kind of told through all the cameras that are in the area. So right now we're seeing things from Casey's perspective, who actually does want to be a YouTube vlogger. She's also Matt's love interest for this movie, but that's not really super important to be honest with you. Then Andrew gets caught filming someone's girlfriend, and dude, you gotta stop lingering on things so much, bro. Like, stop. This is why you're getting in trouble. You're hanging on stuff too long. So he gets bullied again, ends up outside the rave, and that's when we're introduced to Michael B. Jordan's character, Steve. Steve is the guy we saw earlier who's running for class president and is just overall one of the popular kids at school. And it's funny because outside perspectives and him being a cool kid would make you think that maybe Andrew's about to get bullied again in this instance, but the exact opposite is what happens. Steve immediately treats Andrew with kindness and compassion, something that Andrew's so not used to that he doesn't even know how to really react or even accept that kindness. And I remember when I first watched this movie back in 2012 in theaters, and I thought to myself, yeah, this Michael B. Jordan guy is kind of a star. The charisma just kind of oozes through the screen, and honestly, I wish there was more Steve in this movie. But more on that later. Then Steve and Matt go full cave diver, and that's when they run into the entity. And Andrew follows because,
Matt, you're my ride home!
While down in the cave, the boys experience nosebleeds, and it doesn't really seem like a good situation. But then we kind of just cut to the boys being out of the cave, and it leaves you wondering what happens, but we soon find out they are not the same as when they went down there. And this is where we kind of get into that viral video section. When you get to these parts, it feels like, not that they're separate from the rest of the movie, but it feels like they're just happier parts of the movie, or that they were just planned set pieces, because these do feel like things that teenagers would do if they were able to do the things that they can here. The guys then return to the hole that they went down and find that the hole has closed itself in, and they get shooed off by what I believe is the police, but I'm not exactly sure here. They don't really make it clear. Maybe even a government entity of some sort. We then cut to Andrew and Steve having kind of a heart-to-heart while riding in the car together, and Steve brings up a good point.
No, I just want to record all the stuff that we can do, you know?
Yeah, but it's like all the time. You don't feel like it's a little weird, like it puts a barrier between you and everything else?
And Andrew's response is, maybe I do want a barrier. This conversation is interesting because while they are having sort of a personal conversation, Andrew kind of tells him about his dad, but he definitely leaves out the abuse part, and at no point does he really make eye contact with Steve. He's just looking at him through the camera, from what I'd assume, because Steve is looking straight at the camera. He instead opts to look at him through what I believe is the preview screen of the camera, and Steve kind of takes mental note of that. Steve then reveals that his parents are having marital issues and that he believes his mom is having an affair. And the dialogue here seriously is just so natural, and again, that's a credit to Max Landis. Kids that are going through things often bond with other kids who are going through things, and that kind of shines through in this scene as they're bonding through their own familial trauma. And in my opinion, this kind of shows why Andrew and Steve's relationship kind of grows as quickly as it does and they become as close as they do. While Andrew is practicing his Steadicam methods, you can hear in the background that his dad is arguing with either a pharmacist or an insurance company because his ailing mom, well in this case his dad's ailing wife, needs their medication and they're not able to get it. It seems like he can't really afford what it is that they're charging, which is the story of a lot of people going through, you know, medical crises like this. And while Andrew's dad is largely irredeemable in this movie, scenes like this kind of do show why he does have so much just pent-up anger and why he's such a bastard all the time. This scene also kind of shows that Andrew is sort of dissociating from reality throughout, you know, this point in the movie. Now, I bring that up because while they were down in the cave, Matt brings up something interesting. He brings up Plato's allegory of the cave.
You ever heard of Plato's allegory of the cave?
I don't know, Matt. Let's just get this over with.
Now, I'm going to give you the quick version of what Plato's allegory of the cave is, or at least my interpretation of it, because it has to do with how people perceive reality. What Plato's allegory kind of states is that if there are prisoners that are chained up in a cave and puppeteers were to cast shadows on a wall by firelight and make shadows on that, whatever it is that the prisoners are to see while they're in the cave, they would believe that is their own reality because they don't know anything else outside of what they're seeing. But once they leave out of said cave, that sense of reality would get shattered and a new reality would get built because obviously things outside of that cave are going to be extraordinarily different. Now, this film kind of takes that a little bit literally because they actually go down into a cave, come back out, and everything's different. But Andrew takes the biggest hit, I feel like, out of all of these guys, but they all sort of have a shift. Andrew then takes his mom out for a day on the docks, and she kind of passes along a mantra to him that I feel like we as a film audience should have taken a little bit more seriously as it was presented to us. And it's this right here.
You're stronger than this. Can you say that for me?
I'm stronger than this.
Now, the boys are doing more research on their powers and the things that they can do, and they learn that it's like a muscle and they can get stronger if they just exercise and work it out. And then we get back to more of the, teenage viral videos. I think a lot of these strung together are just what Josh Trank had for ideas, and he kind of just strategically places them throughout the movie. And honestly, if I was in high school, I would be no more responsible than they are. Hell, I probably wouldn't be that responsible now. Now, right here is a more crucial scene than we thought as well, because Andrew and Matt are learning how to defend themselves, and Steve is a little bit, let's say, preoccupied at the moment. So with that being said, the lesson doesn't quite sink in, and there'll be more on that later too. Matt then makes his third philosophy reference of the movie, and this kind of gives us that personality shift I was talking about, because he says that now he's kind of leaning towards being more altruistic or working towards, helping the greatest good that he can. And that's very different from the pessimistic Matt that we got at the beginning of the movie. But even though Matt says this, Steve immediately calls him out and tells him that while he may know all of this philosophy, he lacks the initiative to push it forward, so it doesn't ultimately mean anything. Then they show us what I'd consider to be the best real life application of these powers. And like, damn, you can have any parking space you want. Fuck, I'm getting old. While the boys are driving, a typical big truck driver pulls up behind them and is sort of harassing them on the road, trying to get them to move over. And in response, Andrew decides to just give him a little bit of a push back. Oh, fuck, he really pushed that motherfucker into the woods. The boys then rush to the scene to rescue the other driver, and that's when Matt decides that they need to follow rules when using their powers. 3 of them to be exact.
Rule number 1, no using it on living things. Rule number 2, you can't use it when you're angry. That's it. Rule number 3, I don't think we should be using it in public or telling anybody about it.
You can't just
okay?
declare rules, okay?
I will declare
You're the
rules.
one
When
that
you
said
do
that
someone...
Now, the biggest red flag here is instead of just accepting what I would feel like are pretty reasonable rules here, Andrew just kind of objects to them immediately. He ultimately agrees, but he is not really with that idea. And this ends Act 1. The character introductions in this first half are, in my opinion, kind of perfect. They tell you everything we need to know about our main cast, including their struggles or the lack thereof, and it endears us to them pretty quickly. And what I consider the best part of this is kind of that relationship that you see coming between Steve and Andrew. It builds up really quick, it kind of subverts real life biases, and honestly it just seems extremely genuine. Steve as a character kind of flips that whole cool jock persona on its head, because instead of him just being the best at everything, he kind of gets called out on that. Matt says, hey, you're the best at everything, and he says, no, I just tried my best at everything that I can. He's popular because of his personality and how good he is to people. Now, Andrew's kind of a loner and an outsider who doesn't really understand social cues, and this gets hammered on by Matt at the beginning of the film as well. But honestly, I don't blame Andrew for any of this, because if you had an abusive dad and your mom was also, going through what she's going through, you would probably be pretty awkward too. And even when other people try to extend that kindness to him, he doesn't know how to accept it because he's never had that anchor from what it seems. And you can see as the movie goes along that Andrew dissociates more and more from what his old reality was and kind of steps more into what his new perceived reality is. And speaking of which, that brings us to our philosopher, Matt. Matt, in my opinion, has the luxury of being a pessimist in this movie because he doesn't really have any struggles to deal with. I don't even think we see his parents at any point in this movie at all. He just kind of goes through the motions and does things as they come to him. I'd imagine that life is pretty normal for Matt, and through this pessimism thing, he kind of creates his own issues in life because he doesn't really have any, so he makes them up for himself. But from what I feel like with these 3 characters and how they're presented to us, This movie is really an example of nature versus nurture, or rather in this instance, nurture versus nurture, and how kids can be a product of their own environments. This movie throws a twist on that because not only are they products of their own environments, but they're also given superpowers, which in most cases only enhance what's really there. And that's what this movie really hammers on. Act 2 starts with Andrew dissociating some more and Matt telling him that they need to be careful with their powers while they're on the way to meeting up with Steve, who says he has a surprise for them. Yeah, Steve's figured out how to fly, so they can also fly too, which is pretty sick. Now, don't get me wrong, this scene does look a little wonky. It really just looks like actors on wires, and looking back at some interviews, Michael B. Jordan said these wires were the most uncomfortable thing in the world. These harnesses were super uncomfortable as well. But in terms of the reality of the movie, I just kind of cut it to they're learning how to use their powers, which is why it looks kind of wonky, like they're, infants walking in the air. Let me tell you, these scenes of the flying are pure wish fulfillment, like Josh Trank said. They are some of the best scenes in this movie. And what's the number one thing that you do once you learn that you can fly? Mid-air football.
Yeah. Oh! Yeah!
Wow. 2012 really was a different time because that's a dated reference for sure. Also good on the production team for having the boys wear coats while they're flying because I don't think a lot of people think about how cold it would really be up there in the sky like that. Oh, also in the boys don't account for air traffic control because Steve almost immediately gets hit by a plane, which then makes Andrew pull some mid-air heroics while also still somehow saving the camera in the process. It's moments like this that show like this genuine friendship amongst them. But it's also some light power scaling in there too, because with Andrew being able to do all of this so quickly, while the others are barely able to save themselves, or in Matt's instance, barely able to land, you kind of see there are some clear and obvious difference between how they're progressing. And adding on top of just how nice this scene is, the boys also say that this is the best day of pretty much all of their lives. And they start immediately planning trips. And the one place that Andrew says he wants to go is Tibet. This is an interesting mention because the main reason Andrew brings up for wanting to go to Tibet is to see the monks and just to understand and find some peace. Matt then leaves the group to go pretend to be caught off guard at Casey's front door because he wants to give her money to donate to a cause that he saw on her vlog. And in a way, I think he kind of thinks this makes up for him being kind of a pretentious prick for most of the movie, but, it doesn't really land that well for Casey. But Casey can also tell that this is a genuine attempt and effort from Matt to be a better person. So there's still points here for him. Then we cut to Andrew and Steve on the roof of a skyscraper in the city. And while Steve practices for Creed 1, we also see Andrew and Steve having another heart-to-heart. During this, Steve tells Andrew that he should sign up for the talent show. And when Andrew says, "What talent does he have?" Steve kind of points at the camera and says, "Bro, we can figure this out." While getting ready for the talent show, Andrew gets confronted by his dad, who's noticed that Matt has stopped coming to pick up Andrew from school because I assume Andrew just kind of flies to school now. And he realizes that something's up and that Andrew's hiding something. You couple this with Andrew also talking to his mom and being able to tell that, things are getting worse for her condition, and you can tell that this movie is sort of heading in a messier direction. Andrew then performs a magic show that if I was in attendance, I would also be kind of questioning my own reality as well. But afterwards, he becomes one of the more popular kids in school, at least for now. And on the way to the party, Matt makes a statement that we also probably should have taken more seriously as it came out of his mouth.
I can see your head is like exploding right now.
What?
This is the beginning of your downfall. Hubris.
Hubris is described as extreme self-pride, often to the point of arrogance, which can often ignore someone's own limitations or consequences. And to go a little bit deeper, since Matt likes to mention Greek philosophers, with Greek philosophy, it's often said that hubris leads to nemesis, with nemesis being either the making of enemies or tragedy. And at the after party, Andrew is the talk of the town, and he goes upstairs to get a little lucky. And by getting lucky, I mean drinking so much that he threw up on the girl he went upstairs with. Yikes. Steve goes upstairs, and what most people would interpret as him trying to comfort him, Andrew doesn't take it that way. He takes it as if he's being made fun of. Again, I think this is another instance of Andrew not exactly knowing how to accept kindness because he's so used to people ragging on him all the time. This kind of leads to Andrew having a tantrum and flipping out on Steve because he thinks Steve is making fun of him. And following the scene, Andrew then breaks rules number 1 and 2. Or 2 and 3. Or 1 and 3. I don't really remember the order. But he dismembers a spider with his powers, effectively using them when he's angry and using them on a living being. And yeah, this is gonna go the way you think it's gonna go. Andrew's dad then ignores Andrew and his wife's calls for help while he snoops through Andrew's room and finds his camera. He then berates Andrew for having a $500 camera while they're struggling financially. And then Andrew drops what is probably the coldest line in this movie, honestly. This shit makes me laugh every single time.
Every last cent goes to school for you and
I
medication
go to
for your
public
mother.
school.
And now I
You don't
can't even
pay
hear
for
a
public
goddamn
school,
thing.
you idiot.
Like, damn, it really felt good to see him stand up for himself like that, but there's gonna be consequences, unfortunately. Andrew's dad then strikes him and they get into a scuffle, which Andrew ends up winning by a landslide. And on the first watch, this kind of feels pretty cathartic. It feels like it's really good, but every subsequent watch, it really just kind of feels like the beginning of the end. After this struggle between Andrew and his dad, Matt, in a totally remote location, gets a nosebleed, and he kind of shrugs it off. But Steve, being the attentive one, he actually takes note of this and immediately tries to find Andrew. Steve is then able to locate Andrew and he tries to reason with him, which...
What the hell happened to your face? Nothing, man. Just leave me alone. No, dude, that's not nothing. Your dad beat the shit out of you. He can't do that to you. Will you stop acting like you give a shit?
Probably choose some different words there, Steve. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's not the best attempt I've ever seen. Ultimately, this attempt by Steve is unsuccessful and Andrew ends up inadvertently killing Steve. Now, this is kind of a callback to that earlier scene where they kind of learned how to protect themselves and Steve didn't. I feel like if Steve had been paying attention during that and this was something he was working on, he possibly may have survived this instance, because Andrew doesn't try to kill him here. The way I interpret it is Andrew's protecting himself, Steve isn't. This lightning is a sort of threat to both of them, but you know, Steve being the one not protecting himself gets struck and that's it for him. And this hits Matt hard because it doesn't really make sense that Steve would be in a field by himself struck by lightning. So he tries to find Andrew and he ends up confronting him, and it turns out Andrew's been dodging him for the last, I'd imagine, week or so. He insinuates that Andrew knows more about this event than he's letting on, and Andrew kind of takes offense to that and he takes the opportunity to storm off. Pardon the pun, that was really bad. Damn. Now, I kind of think this scene is shot in an interesting way because we don't really see Andrew's face until the very end of it. But with the way that he's shooting it with his camera himself, it kind of feels like he thinks he's a movie character, or like he's just sort of observing himself, not even really being an own participant in his own life. So we go back to high school and we see that Andrew's kind of regressed back to his loner tendencies, but with a twist.
Hey, Wayne!
Fuck, that shit is brutal to watch every single time. I'm never gonna get used to seeing that. He then even keeps the teeth as keepsakes or souvenirs, or like souvenirs, am I right? Yeah, I'm not proud of that one. Andrew then rants and gives us his new philosophy where he believes that he is an apex predator, or the top of the food chain. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with an apex predator, it's pretty much an animal or a being like humans. We don't have any natural enemies in nature. So in a way, humans are apex predators already. Andrew's just kind of taking that to the next level by saying he's better than all the humans around him as well. Matt then confronts Andrew about the incident at school, and after some light power scaling, we kind of figure out Andrew is a little bit above Matt here. Andrew then leaves to go get his mom's prescription, which is probably the one that his dad was talking to the pharmacist on the phone about earlier, and we find out that prescription costs $700 for them to next day it. So, hearing that price, Andrew decides to take matters into his own hands. Andrew then takes his dad's old firefighting gear and kind of makes a makeshift sort of costume suit with it. It kind of shows Andrew doesn't completely hate his dad, or at least he doesn't hate who his dad used to be. But it's also a bit of dramatic irony because in dressing up like his dad, he's becoming exactly like the guy he does hate now. So it's really just a cycle of abuse that's perpetuating itself through Andrew. He then goes to rob those neighborhood drug dealers that we saw earlier for what probably amounts to like 80 to 100 bucks looking at it here. And that's definitely not the 700 he needs, so Andrew decides to up the stakes and goes to rob a local convenience store. But play a stupid game, win a stupid prize, because and this maims Andrew and I think probably kills the store owner, considering he was closer to the blast. Also, just a cool little detail, look how the camera is floating in this scene. Like, I never noticed that on the first watch, but now I see it every time, and I just think it's such a cool detail they decided to add. It makes sense for the movie, and yeah, it's just kind of, it's a little wonky looking, but it's cool. Andrew ends up in the hospital and we see his dad being walked to his room, and his dad does kind of show a whiff, just a hint of humanity, when he reveals that Andrew's mom passed away the night prior. But that humanity doesn't last long because he immediately starts blaming Andrew for his mom's death and is about to strike his son who was in a coma. Andrew's then somehow able to sense that his dad is about to throw this punch. He catches the fist and ultimately destroys the hospital room. Now, this ends Act 2, and this act has a lot of foreshadowing in it. Some subtle, some not so subtle, but ultimately it's the build-up that's important, and honestly, I think it's something that you can see coming from a mile away in this movie. So the majority of this movie, we've been seeing it from Andrew's point of view, so he has been our main protagonist. So we've gotten the opportunity to know Andrew, we've gotten the opportunity to see the humanity of Andrew, especially through his interactions with Steve. So it brings sort of a humanity and levity to this what's gonna become twisted coming of age story. Steve and Andrew relate to each other through trauma. However, that's kind of where it ends, because while Steve has a support system, he has parents he can still talk to, he has friends, he's the most popular kid in school, Andrew doesn't have any of that, and quite frankly, he doesn't know what to do with any of that. And it kind of hurts to see, because Andrew with his powers is probably one of the more capable, or one of the most capable people in the world. But when it comes to something so simple as just human interactions or coping mechanisms or just anything like that, he just literally can't do it. It's not something that's built into him at this point. It hasn't been built up. So instead of taking the opportunity to confide in his friends, he instead decides to lean on his powers. He doesn't use the support system that he has now, kind of built up, because he just isn't used to having it. He could have talked to Matt, he could have talked to Steve, but he actively chooses not to throughout this movie. I also find it interesting, and I've seen some discourse online as well, that a lot of people thought that Andrew, when he got his powers, should have just left. But me personally, I think he just didn't leave because he didn't want to abandon his mom. His mom was kind of his last tie to humanity, and once she was gone, or at least once that was threatened, all humanity kind of went out the window, because he needed to fix that. But also keep in mind the words that she left Andrew with, because that's going to be pivotal. Also, while we're here, we can talk about Matt and sort of his personality and his development, because a lot of this stuff for him is done off screen. We get hints towards it once he is on screen and he's shown, but a good majority of it is off screen. But what this movie kind of shows us throughout is that Matt started out as a pessimistic character, but has moved his way towards altruism throughout this movie, and even, slightly more heroic even. It's a passive brand of heroism, but still heroism nonetheless. But it's still not fully developed, and it's still kind of misguided, because Matt has the opportunity several times throughout this movie to just talk to Andrew as well, but he instead decides to berate, yell, and at one point even tries to strike Andrew. This is what Andrew's been experiencing his whole life in terms of his dad and just, bad things happening around him. So this approach was never going to get through to Andrew. I truly believe that if Matt had tried to sit down, talk to Andrew, let him know everything was okay, and let him know that everyone is there for him, we might have had a different movie entirely. But Matt just kind of helps perpetuate all of this. And since Matt chose the path he chose, let's get to the final act. Matt feels a disturbance in the force and ultimately gets one of the biggest nosebleeds we've seen in this movie, and he knows that something's wrong with Andrew, and especially after he sees a news update, he decides to rush straight into the city. Andrew then flies out of the building and drops his dad from a very unlivable height, but Matt is able to get there in time and catches him. Thus begins the big fight between our two boys, and a familiar line comes back.
You're all weak!
Andrew!
I'm stronger than all of
Andrew,
this!
listen to me, okay? Just, I need you to listen. Just focus for a second.
Do not tell me what to do!
Now, this scene is powerful because it shows that Andrew was feeling, like he was abandoned this whole time, like no one was there for him.
It is too late! I'm done! It's over! God, you treated me like shit! You left me alone!
Andrew, you're not alone up here. I'm here with you.
And Matt tries to confide in him, but obviously right now, this is just too little too late. Matt, throughout this conflict, tries to subdue and just try to get Andrew to leave instead of, having to go through with it. But ultimately, Andrew just can't hear him anymore. It's just way too far gone. With that being said, Matt is forced to kill Andrew. The movie then ends with Matt flying to Tibet and leaving Andrew's camera there, essentially laying him to rest out there. Which ties back to that, because now Andrew's able to find some peace, or at least the peace he was looking for. Now, I want to talk about Matt and what he says at the end of this movie, because he says he wants to find answers about what happens to them. And I did a little bit of digging, and there's actually interviews where Max Landis explains what happened to these guys and how they got their powers. So I'm gonna break that down for you now. When writing this movie, he wanted their powers to come from something mundane, not aliens, nothing crazy like that, but what he described as big prehistoric rock creatures or rock algae that live, at one point when the earth was just its outer core, and then over time layers been built up. And under those layers are these prehistoric rock creatures that are able to travel via electromagnetism. Now, this explanation actually makes a lot of sense because anytime there's a big display of powers, or even the first initial meeting of this prehistoric rock creature, you can hear that there's weird noises and buzzing and vibrations that you would attribute to a camera being near like a super magnet or something that's interfering with the signal.
Out of here, please. Is it showing up on the camera like that? I don't know, man. It's messing with it. I don't really want to film. Dude, I'll buy you a new one.
So this telekinesis is based on electromagnetism, and this creature was essentially trying to turn these boys into drones. This also explains the headaches and nosebleeds because they're putting just tremendous stress on their brains. So this organism was making noise and drawing the kids toward it, and exuding light, sort of like an anglerfish, to try to lure them towards it because this rock creature needed to feed. Now what it does is it turns people into these electromagnetic drones and essentially wipes them out from what Max Landis described, so they wouldn't have any type of sentience themselves. They would just become drones of this rock, and they would be able to have telekinesis and fly out to go get more people to bring back. The problem is, in this instance, the rock creature died during the process, so there is no, I guess, host for them to return back to. It's also why the boys keep their sentience and they're just able to use their powers, because there's no mission for them, there's no other rock creature. I believe from what he said, there were hopes that this movie would get sequels. I don't know what the second movie was going to be about. I don't think he does either, really. But he explained that the third movie was going to be about another one of these rock creatures sort of coming up, it actually being able to make drones, and then Matt would have to fight against those drones to protect humanity. But they didn't get that, so I don't think we're ever going to see that at any point. Now, this explanation is given by Max Landis and explains what happened to the boys, but ultimately, it doesn't really matter what happened to the boys. What matters is they got powers and they are who they are. And that's what the movie excels at. Now, something that I felt was kind of interesting while I watched this was that there was no score for this movie. There's no real music playing throughout it at all. And I found out through another interview with Josh Trank that that was very intentional. He used American Graffiti as sort of his muse for this because that film also doesn't have a score. And he decided that it would just keep more realism to the movie and would immerse the viewers even more, especially in those subtle, quiet moments. You're really just sat there to just think about yourself, your feelings, and the character's feelings. It's sort of an eerie quietness to it that really helps amplify the actors' performances, and I think it does a great job. Where is everybody now? As I said at the beginning, Michael B. Jordan is an absolute superstar. He's become this generation's Rocky Balboa. He starred opposite Chadwick Boseman in one of the biggest movies of the 2010s. And he's currently solidifying himself alongside Ryan Coogler as one of the best actor-director duos ever, quite frankly. He's been absolutely nothing short of the superhero that Josh Trank saw when he casted him in this part. Dane DeHaan is a bit of a stranger case, because given this performance and the performance he gave later this year in 2012 with A Place Beyond the Pines, you would think that he's really in that sort of Leonardo DiCaprio realm or tier. Not to compare them like talent-wise, but you know, the vibe is kind of there. Even like an actor like Jesse Plemons, just to give you, just more people to kind of work with what I'm saying here. But his filmography just isn't quite there. Like, there's great movies in it like Oppenheimer and Lincoln, but for every one of those, you also have a Valerian and Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that's coming from a diehard Spider-Man fan. So it's safe to say that Dane is still successful in his own right, but from this movie, you would really think that he'd be doing more. As for Alex Russell, his days of being top billed in movies are done, at least for the moment. He kind of put a reverse Michael B. Jordan. He went to the silver screen instead, starring in SWAT. SWAT being Emmy nominated. Sure, there were some mixed reviews, but the show got 8 seasons, so we'll consider that a win for the boys. It's funny because Josh Trank and Max Landis are actually the two least successful ones out of this project. Josh Trank, this landed him Fan 4 stick, which, gross. Absolutely gross. And his last time that we see him directing was in 2020 with Capone, which also got pretty mixed reviews. And to be honest, I'm not touching the Max Landis situation because I already get enough angry comments. I'm just gonna let you guys look that one up for yourselves and come up with your own conclusion as to what the hell was happening there. Landis attempted to write a new script for a sequel, but ultimately the studio just didn't really like it, and Josh Trank didn't like it at all, so he just kind of detached himself entirely from Chronicle and the project. But in 2021, producer John Davis stated that he wanted to make an all-female sequel to this movie. I guess just in the future, I believe it was 10 years after the taking place of the last one. We're already past 2022, which I assume is when he wanted to try to get that one out, considering the last one takes place, I believe, in like 2012. But we haven't seen any type of news towards it yet. So I'm not ruling it out entirely, but it's not looking super likely at this point. Personally, I think Chronicle should just stay as a one-off film. I think it had the perfect ending to it, the perfect conclusion. We don't really need to see more. It's just, I feel like fulfilling a need of people wanting to see more, and I just don't think that's necessary. But it's not about me. What do you guys think? Should Chronicle get a sequel? And what other films do you want to see me cover on the channel? I've got a plan, I've got a list of things that I want to get through, but ultimately I want you guys to see what you want to see too. So let me know in the comments down below what you're interested in for the channel. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow me on socials, those links are down in the description below. And yeah, let's talk movies again next time. Peace. Hey, here's a little bonus clip for everybody who stuck around. I'm going to start streaming on this YouTube and on Twitch, so you can follow me on those two. Those links will be down in the description. I'm going to try to stream at least twice a week. Just to keep things up. One should be maybe a movie stream. I can do some gaming stuff too. I've got Oblivion and I've never played Oblivion, so probably gearing up to get through that on here and just get some gameplay for you guys too. Just something outside of me educating you about movies and just have a little bit of fun. So if you want to join those, you're more than welcome to. If not, it's not your cup of tea. That's absolutely fine. The movie reviews will still be here. Love you guys. Peace.